Hello, time is 8:30 Los Angeles time. This is Narayana Swami starting the event scheduled for March 7th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time of United States. I thank you all for taking the time to attend this presentation of my book launch, Understanding the Vedas. The Kindle version of this book was released last October by Amazon, and the paperback was released a couple of weeks ago by Amazon in United States, Japan, Canada, and Europe, but not in few of the other locations. Especially Amazon is not releasing the paperback in India. So the paperback in India will be published by Sakshi Trust, Bangalore, and they have set the book release date for March 15th, and the shipment of paperback books in India will begin on March 16. Please contact the Sakshi Trust. I will provide the details towards the end of this talk. So, all or most of you know about the Vedas. Some of you may be extremely knowledgeable as well. So, therefore, I must begin this talk by answering two questions. The first question that I will answer is that everybody knows about Vedas, so why have you written this book? And I answer by saying that I wrote this book to explain to a wider audience of people the newfound qualitative and transformative improvement in my understanding of the Vedas. And I wanted to share that qualitative and transformative improvement in my understanding. The second question that I will ask, of course, there will be a lot of questions for you, but to set this discussion, I wanted to pose two questions. As I said, the first question is, why have I written a book when everybody who has grown up in India and was Sanatana Dharma practitioners, they all know about the Veda. So why have you written this? And I answer by saying that I had a very qualitative and transformative improvement in my understanding. And I wanted to share that with you. The second question is, why have I titled this book as Understanding the Vedas, as though there is an implication that the Vedas are not understood? There is no implication at all. I decided to do the understanding of the Vedas because this book, in my opinion, provides an authentic and accurate understanding of the Vedas. And if people, whatever be their level of understanding, read this book, they may find newer points about the Vedas that they may or may not know. And I show some examples and all that. And that will allow people to practice the Vedas because I have benefited by the practice of Vedas. So the second question has multiple meanings. First, since Sanatana Dharma and Veda followers, uh, Sanatana Veda followers have not had any formal education in Vedas. None of us had. We have heard from our parents, from our friends. We may have read some books. We may have read Puranas. We may have listened to our acharyas, and we have gotten various ideas and opinions. And there is many of us not having studied Sanskrit, even though I have studied Sanskrit, that preliminary level of Sanskrit knowledge is not adequate to read the Vedas and what Vedas have written. So we have to rely, because Vedas are written in original Sanskrit, not the recent classical Sanskrit. So for us to read Sanskrit, the Vedas and understand is not that easy unless you are a deep scholar, deep scholar in Sanskrit. Most of us have, many may not have studied Sanskrit, and even those who have taken Sanskrit as a second language or a third language, or even those who have studied Sanskrit and graduated in Sanskrit, the level of understanding, knowledge may or may not be adequate to understand the Vedas. So we rely on other experts' opinion. And most people have relied on English language translations by Max Muller, especially the 19th century English language. There's a Max Muller, Wilson, Griffith, they publish. And the conventional messaging says that the Vedas are Karma Kanda. There is Veda and Vedanta, all of us would have heard. Vedas are Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda consists of rituals. Rituals are devoid of any wisdom, and all the jnana is in Vedanta. So many people, based on this understanding that it is rituals and it is devoid of wisdom, you do certain things, you don't understand what you are doing, why you are doing. So there is such a negative perception. So some people do not study that. A more accurate understanding and explanation needs to be given so that people will, aha, this Veda has deeper meaning. So let me try to understand. So once to spread this message that any conventional messaging that it is only rituals and it is not much lasting value, you may get some material prosperity, but if you want to get jnana and liberation, which are all true, there is nothing wrong in what uh, the conventional messaging says, but conventional messaging sort of gives a negative branding, which may not have helped to study the Veda. The second part is that, as the title says, one has to have a correct understanding of any topic for you to continue interest on that one. If you start with some hearsay or not accurate information, based on that, you will form opinion, oh, I don't want that, etc. Therefore, it is necessary to correctly understand. And therefore, I provide a correct and authentic understanding. And I encourage all of you to start reading that one. I have written the book in a very simple, easy to understand manner. So let's come straight away to the topic at hand. What are the Vedas? Everyone knows Vedas are the authoritative texts of Sanatana Dharma. They say they are the Pramanas. What do we mean by Pramana? If we have any doubt on anything, you look up this text. This is the authoritative text. This is the Pramanam. So do not go against what is said in the Vedas. So If anyone has any doubt, then Veda is the final authority. So that is why it is called Pramana, authoritative text. And people know there are the things, but again, because it is in Sanskrit, people are not able to read and understand for themselves. So there is already a difficulty. So you need to have some translation, some books written by somebody. Now, how people may also, again, there are other questions. So first of all, let us understand, what does Veda say? If I'm starting to say that the conventional messaging, that it is karma kanda and rituals and is not accurate. So what is my accurate? Tell me before I take further interest on that. So according to you, what exactly Vedas say? And I try to simply answer that question by saying Vedas want to help every human being lead a all-round perfection life. Note this word, all-round perfection. Not perfection in your own field. Suppose you are a chemist, not the number one chemist in your field. That's only perfection in a particular field. Vedas say we can help you. Vedas, our rishis, our rishis are saying. So I'm just going to straight away come to the essence of what is this qualitative and transformative understanding that I got over the past 10 to 15 years. I am going to let all of you know that Vedas, by studying and practicing Vedas, it will help you to develop all round perfection. So, straight away, there are several corollaries to this statement. If I believe and I have experience, you see, that is another point, second point, show me. Just like when you say something, hey, prove it to me. Just like on any other subject. You are not going to go into and talk to an astrophysicist. Show me how to go to outer space. You need to go to the training through that, or you are not going to go and ask a uh, neurologist. Explain all what happens to me, why you conclude that this is what I want. Just like in any field. But when it comes to Vedas, they want to get the answer in the next 2 minutes. No, it will take time, but you have to go through from the beginning. So that is why we are to have a formal class or a formal book that gives an authentic meaning. So if you say Vedas and our rishis, Vedas consist of two aspects you need to understand about whenever we talk about Vedas are rishis got these mantras for us. See, you may have heard the word that all of us are born in this world with three debts. Rinam, Rinam, Sanskrit word is Rinam, three debts. What are the three debts? Deva, Rishi, Pitar. We are indebted to, we have debt to repay to Devas, to Rishis, and to Pitras. It may be a little bit of a surprise to youngsters to hear that we have to have, um, we owe, we have to repay a debt to Devas, Rishis, and Pitras because the modern day children, especially growing up in the West, very soon, after a while, all of us think we are the center of the universe. We know everything. We don't know anything to anybody. I have acquired everything out of my hard work. So I don't owe any debt and all that. But our Shastra says we owe these debts to Deva Rishi Pidru. Why do we say that? These are the parents who have brought us into this world, who have our teachers. Mother is your first teacher. Mother, everybody's mother is the first teacher. Father comes next teacher. Then they take you to other teachers to teach you all the value system, then send you through education and you become there. So certainly the Pidru Rina you all may follow. But it also says we owe debt to Devas and Rishis, because Devas and Rishis are helping us. Whether you seek their help or not, they have only one mission: to help all. Of course, here I want to take one sentence out of context to say the Purana. Sometimes you see that Indra, especially Devendran, who is the leader of the Devas, he plays some tricks and all that. And so you may think that, hey, they also uh, sometimes show you into paths that try to put, there are many stories. Indra tried to do this. Indra does not want anybody to take his kingdom away and all those things. None of that, that the Puranas may have various reasons to develop those stories. But the Vedas, Rishis and Devas only have want to help you. To help you for what? To attain all-round perfection. So, who is a Rishi? Why do we? Why is it said that we are indebted to? Why is it said that we are indebted to the Rishis? Because Rishis got these mantras. Rishis did not create the mantras. Rishis did not develop the mantras. Rishis were pure human beings. They spend most of their time meditating. They led a family life also. They led the householders. They taught their disciples. And they did a significant amount of their time doing meditating. And during that meditation times, they achieved super conscious states, and they were able to listen to, hear, or see the mantras. Where are the mantras? The mantras are residing in the Parame Vyoman. Parame Vyoman, that is what the Vedas say. Mantras are in Parame Vyoman, the supreme station. I'll come back. All those are described in the book, but I want to give you some few lead points for you to think about and start getting an interest why you should read this book. And therefore, so these mantras, the rishis, and a person is said to be a rishi if and only if he has received a mantra. For example, rishis, I said rishis led their family life, they had children, their son or daughter are not rishis. If they want to become rishi, they have to lead a pure life, do meditation, and during that meditation, they must be able to achieve the superconscious state when they are able to hear or see a mantra. then they become a rishi. So all these rishis, we are indebted to the rishis because they gave us the mantras. Where are the mantras? Mantras are in Parime Vyoman, where the devas are also there. Now I want to use the word deva. Deva is translated as God in English language. Deva is not a translated word. Deva has come from the word Sanskrit word div, to shine, to show light. So devas are powers of light. So the rishis, we are indebted to rishis because rishis are able to imagine, just like where the mantras are. All of you may know the cloud computing. Everyone knows the modern cloud computing, and your data is stored in the cloud computing. You have a password, you get that. Now, you and I don't have the password to receive the mantra, but you can get the password if you are willing to lead a pure life and do meditation, and with God's grace we are able to get a super conscious state. Then we can receive the mantras even today. In fact, there is a Devarata in Karnataka, Gokarnam, but they will blurt out because they are not, they are conscious, but they are not aware. This is not something that they are creating. They are seeing it. As soon as they say, it gets stored in their subtle heart and they blurt out. And if there are their shishyas around who will transcribe it, that is how these mantras come. So we owe a debt of gratitude. We have to repay the debt to rishis because they got us the mantras. And what are these mantras? Mantras is the way through which you can communicate to the devas. And who are these devas? I'll tell you. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadandi, one of the Rigveda sloga that is quoted in the book also, is Rigveda says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadandi. The truth is one, Ekam Sat. Vipra Bahuda Vadandi. Knowledgeable people call it by various names. Agnim, Indram, Mitram, Varunam. Those are the devas. Of course, here I want to introduce another concept. You may have heard, they are the Vedic gods, not the Puranic gods. So, in other words, in the Vedas, Agni, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Vayu, Ashwins, Aditi, Saraswati, goddesses, these are all, and they're all same as that one, supreme. So, the whole concept is there is a supreme person. It is not, Veda does not name that person. That person is Ekam Sat, Sa Ekaha. Taittiriya Upanishad famously says, Sa Ekaha, Sa Evam Vit. All those come in Taittiriya Upanishad later, much later. Upanishads call it as Brahman. But Vedas, Rig Vedas is the ultimate one. So, the Devas are going to help you. So, your job is to invite these Devas to you. And there are mantras like Agna Ayahi Vidaye Ayahi. Ayahi. Come to me. Indra Ayahi. Ayahi. Indra Ayahi Chitrabhano. You are a very man, culture. Indra Ayahi. Jeshita. Viprajudaha. You know all these, so many things. Satakrado. You know 100 things. So many adjectives are there. If you learn Rigveda, I have quoted few of the Rigveda mantras also in my book towards the end in chapter 10. So, mantras. So, these contexts is Devas, Rishis, Pitrus. We repay our debt to all of them. We repay our debt to Devas by learning and chanting Vedanta. We repay our debt to Rishis by thinking about Rishis in the near to Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, Gayatri Mantra was revealed to Vishwamitra. So every time you chant the Gayatri Mantra, you just say, Rishir Vishwamitraha, Gayatri Chandas, Savita Devada. Gayatri Mantra is addressed to Savitri. Savitri is the creator, the sun, Lord Sun, Savita, the creator, Pratyaksha Brahman. That one. You can look at him as that one. So now I move on to mantra. Mantra. What is mantra? We all heard there are mantra chanting, and because it has been given such a, we have been told in the communal messaging in a casual manner. Oh, the priest comes and chants some mantra. When there is a puja going on in your house, instead of listening to you, paying attention to the mantras or what goes on. Even many people will say when a big function goes on, the more modern you are, you will tell the priest, do all the puja, call me when the time for Arati. I'll come and hold my hand. I have done the puja. That is how people say, no, you listen to the mantra. Mantra, what is the mantra? Manana Rayate iti mantraha. Mananat, by your mind, Trayate, protect it. It will protect you. Mananat Trayate iti mantraha. So, mantra has a power to protect you. I thought that is someone who has studied this. For puja time, someone has to chant some mantras. No. You, with sincerity, with devotion, chant the mantra. You will be able to communicate with that deva. And the devas have psychological powers. He is the divine willpower. If you want to have willpower, in anything you need to have a willpower. What to do, and not only the willpower, not like the my way or the highway type will. I'm a strong willed person. I will not easily listen to others. No, that's not it. Agni is the divine will. Divine will means that willpower, once you get it, you will not only be right in the short term, but you will also be right in the long term because Agni is directing you. So Agni is the power, willpower. Indra is the Lord of the divine mind. Once you have Agni and Indra, you only have to say Agni Ayahi. Oh, Agni Ayahi, of course, the Chaturveda Parayanam, at the end of every puja that you hear, Agni Ayahi, Nano Havyadaraye, Nihota Sati Barishi. So, even if you don't fully, you must try to understand the meaning of the mantra. And of course, now when you come to the meaning of the mantra, there are so many questions. Do you want the surface meaning, the external meaning, or the deeper adhyatmic meaning? So many levels are there. We are not going to solve everything in this 30 minutes or 1 hour. But I want to say that mantra, we must try to understand the adhyatmic. Not only, for example, in many Veda mantras are deeply spiritual. So that was one of the key points mentioned in the book. So I want to take one more point on mantra, and I want to read 2 sentences that I have written in section 1.3.3, the power of mantra. Just to get you a flavor, why you have to learn the mantra. I am reading from my book. This is the paperback version of the book. I am reading from page 7. The power of mantra. The essential power of the mantra is to make us see the world or thought beyond our senses. That one sentence must start making you think. We can all see with our senses, right? Who is sitting in front? As far back, whatever we can see, we can see. But I add a sentence. The essential power of the mantra is to make us see the world or thought beyond our senses. So you get a extrasensory perception by this mantra. But if you ask me to say, "Hey, tell me a mantra," I try to repeat it, and I don't see anything beyond what I can see. It will take time, just like anything else. Even for a very powerful medicine, for it to take effect on you, it will take time. In the same manner, different things take a different time. But if you start understanding the mantra, it will help you. This contact with the supraphysical world endowed, endows the person who sees with a certain power, the intensity of which varies from person to person. How long you are practicing, how sincere you are, how much devoted you are while chanting the mantra. Depending upon that, you can communicate with with the particular deva for whom the mantra. If you are chanting a Ganapati mantra, Ganana Antva Ganapatigam Havamahe. If you are chanting that, you are chanting Ganapati, you can communicate with Ganapati. Ganapati has certain powers and he is ready to give that powers to you. But it depends on your devotion and your sincerity with each other. You don't have to do 24/7 this mantra. If you have only 5 minutes every day, that's fine. Once you become believer, you may increase it to 10, 15. Then you do all your other things and you will realize your works are getting done at a better level of perfection than what we had before. And Sri Aurobindo says, Aurobindo is a great Rishi. Aurobindo was the person who brought back again the spiritual and psychological meanings. Based on that, Professor Kashyap wrote the translation, and I have been doing research with Professor Kashyap, and I have read the books of Aurobindo and Kabali Shastri, and I have summarized everything in the book. That is why I want you to read the book. And I am quoting this Aurobindo's on mantra, and that is from his book Sikatavida. The mantra can not only create new subjective states in ourselves. Look at the power of what he says. He says not only it can create new subjective states in ourselves, alter our physical being, reveal knowledge and faculties we did not possess before, can not only produce similar results in other minds than that of the user. In fact, not only the person who chants, but even the person who, but also can produce vibrations in the mental and vital atmosphere, which result in effects, in actions, and even in production of material forms on the physical plane. And this is stated by Sri Aurobindo. He's a modern day Rishi. So you do not have to doubt what he says. But I'm not asking you to believe what he says, but initially you have to have the belief. Then you continue chanting these mantras or listening to the mantra. If you don't know, when a priest comes next time to do, or when you go to the temple when the priest is chanting the mantra, you pay attention to the mantra and listen to that. That's all what you have to read. Whether you know the meaning, that will be fine. But even if you don't know the meaning, simply listening to the mantra, Aurobindo says, that is in there. So I want you to read, don't read this book as a novel. Read small, small pages and read quietly. And I think if I start going at this page, then I will not be able to answer many of the questions. So I said I want to give about 30 minutes of my talk. So I have given an overview. The Veda mantra, that is power. So listen to mantra, try to learn the mantra, try to chant the mantra, try to develop this. Then the Rishi who got this mantra, The Rishi is power. So when you chant Rishi Vishwamitraha, Gayatri Chandas, Savita Devada, Savitri, the Deva, and Vishwamitra, the Rishi, their power is also in that Gayatri mantra. So the mantra itself has a power. Then the Deva and the Rishi are also coming along with you and helping you to lead your life and all your activities attain all round perfection. Not only the puja that you do will become perfect, not only the work that you do becomes perfect, you will have a sense of calmness and quietness because you have done your best and your work is getting increasing levels of perfection is being accepted. So, with this, and I will say there is the book has two parts. Is written. I will take another 5 minutes or so about book. Then I will try to take some questions. I see one or two questions. That question is connected with this also. This question has come from Ethik Aital. Can you tell us a little? Those who have want any question, you can write it. I'll see it on the screen and I will respond it. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? So uh, that is also part of my thing that I wanted to do in 30 minutes. It's already past 35 minutes now. I'll take in a stop it in another 5 minutes. The book is written in 11 chapters in two parts. Part one gives the general definition. Vedas, so many scriptural texts have come out of the Vedas. All the scriptural texts, understand one thing, all the scriptural texts that you talk about, whether it is Vedanga, Upanga, Upaveda, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra, Yoga, Patanjali's Yoga, Yoga was, every of these have the source as Vedas. Notwithstanding what you may have heard, Veda and Vedanta, the way people understand is these are two different tracks. Veda is rituals, Vedanta is jnana. That is the convention, that is where the accurate and authentic projection. So in chapter 1, I provide when all these texts were developed, why all these texts were developed, and where we are. In chapter 2, I provide a timeline, historical timeline narrative from 6000 BCE. And this is another point. You may say, I set the origin of the Vedas. Of course, Paramacharya, Kanchi Paramacharya, in his book, Daivathin Kural, Veda Dharma, which is book which is Hindu Dharma, published in English. He has given the lectures as Daivathin Kural. What he says is, Vedas are always present. But to the modern scientist and the modern person, the modern academics, you have to always trace it to a date. And the date that we have now concluded is 6000 BC or earlier. But the Western authors, the 18th and 19th centuries, Max Muller, Wilson, and all that, they said, oh, these Vedas are only 1500 BCE. Because according to them, or according to Christianity, the world started only the famous pronouncement by the Archbishop of Ireland in 4000 BCE that the world was born at 9 a.m. on October 23, 4004 BCE. That is why Genesis says that world is only 6,000 years old. But we know yugas and yugas, the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga, all those things, and years, and it is continuously going on. The circular time, as Carl Sagan said, oh, the Indians are right. The scientific proof is that it is about 8 billion years, whereas our own calculation comes very close, the closest. So They were all saying it is 1500 BC. No, I said to trace it because there are scientific evidence. Jerige, then Casanas published papers. They said it is pre-Harappan. Harappan as a civilization started around 70 years. There are so many misconceptions about Vedas came 19th and 20th centuries due to the English translations and the Westerners trying to define what Vedas is. And of course, India being ruled by British, we always looked up to, unless we have the approval of British, we will not accept anything. That continues even today, that unless there is foreign approval, whatever homegrown is not being accepted. We have to be firm in what we know. As long as we thoroughly understand, we must be able to stand up and say, I believe in this. So I trace from 6000 BCE to 2020 CE, when the book was written in 2020 October. So I have divided it into 10 important publications. That is in chapter 2. There are more than 10. Thousands of publications have come. But for my narrative, I have selected 10 important. So there is historical term in chapter 2. In chapter 3, I see what are the surface meaning, what is the adhyatmic meaning, and what is the symbols and symbolism used in Vedas. And in chapter 4, I briefly talk about the Purva Mimamsa and Sainacharya's works and how the current Vedic chanting is being done in the Veda Parsala. Chapter 5, I discuss Vedanta, all the Dasha Upanishads, because I taught the Dasha Upanishads to my friends. Isha, Kena, Katha, Taittiriya, Mundaka, Mandukya, Aitareya, Shesasara, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka. I taught all of them in a 4-year period. So there's a summary of Vedanta in chapter 5. And chapter 6 is the current worship pattern. So the chapter 1 through 6, if you read, you will get an idea of the current practices. Then in the part 2, beginning in chapter 7, I introduced the new spiritual and psychological meanings as propounded by Sri Aurobindo Maharshi. 1914, just 100 years ago, he brought back what our rishis were originally teaching these spiritual meanings and all that to their initiate people, who in turn became other rishis. But towards the end, the rishis found that people don't have time to devote all the way to meditation and all that. So rishis encourage outer yajna. But after the rishi period over, then only outer yajna remained. So from about 3000 BCE, when Vedavyasa classified this into 4 Vedas and all that, during Rishi's time, there was only one collection of mantras. That was Vedas. Then Vedavyasa classified into 4 Vedas, and then there will be other books like Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads came. So the second part 2, chapter 7, talks about spiritual and psychological meanings. Chapter 8 talks about Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, all the 4 Vedas. Chapter 9 discusses about Yajna. Chapter 10 integrates everything. And I have asked, what next? Now that you have read my book all the way, what next? And I have given some suggestions in section 10.4, chapter 10, 10.4 and I have provided the first full sukta of Rig Veda on Agni. First sukta is for Agni. So one of the questions is also answered. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? So this gives and chapter 11 is conclusion, and there are 7 appendices. Appendix 1 discusses in detail about Vedanga, Upanga, Upaveda, Shaddarsana, and all that. Chapter 2 says how we preserved the Vedas with no writing and all that from day 1 to here, how the mantras were accurately preserved. They have devised the 11 methods to do preserve chant mantras by krama, jada, ghana forms and all that. Then chapter 3, appendix 3 talks about rishis of Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas. Appendix 4 talks about the samskara, Shodasa samskaras. Appendix 5 talks about a colloquy between Agastya and Indra, where Indra says, go the right way, call Agni and Indra and learn, and then you can go to study Vedanta. So study Vedas first and then go to Vedanta. So that is chapter 5. I'm quoting Rigveda Sutta, Mandala 170th Sutta. Then appendix 6 and 7 are a biodata of Aravinda Maharshi, Kabali Shastri, and Professor Kashyap, my own person under whom that I am doing research, my teacher who opened my eyes to this spiritual knowledge and all that, with whom I am doing for the past 8-9 years. So all these are in this book. I request you to request your local library to purchase the book. Libraries will get that book for you. Take it. Those who can afford to buy it, purchase the book. The India publication, Sakshi Trust, has a, I'll send it in the right, I have written it in the Facebook. You can see the reference for Sakshi Trust details. They have a pre-publication rate for 500 rupees. The books are sold including postage. After March 16, regular price will be 700 rupees plus postage. So the details are there. So with this, I will look for any other questions that come. If there are not any other questions, I would like to conclude this session by sharing this newfound spirituality and wisdom aspects of Veda and a deeper understanding. I have been a practitioner of Veda in my house. I was taught the Shiva Puja immediately after my Upanayana by my father, and I and my younger brother used to do Shiva Puja until I left home for engineering college. Immediately after Upanayana for about 6 years. Then for the next engineering college and until I settled down from marriage and all that, it was off and on. Just a basic Sandhyavandanam only, but not much Veda. But then afterwards I continued my own puja at my own home and all that. So I continued doing that. I have benefited by that. That is why I wrote this book. I want all of you to learn the Vedas, learn, go to your Acharya, listen to the Veda mantras wherever it is being chanted. Simply by listening also you get the benefit. Those who can chant, continue to chant. Do not ignore them. Do not treat them. Do not believe some of the negative messaging that is going on around that, especially the Western translations, because they looked at the external meaning and they could not understand the deeper meaning of what Veda is trying to say. Veda always uses double and triple meanings. Sanskrit words themselves have multiple meanings, and they use symbols and symbolism. And people who do not take a deeper time to understand that may not be able to understand. So, with this, is there any other question? Huh? The book, yes, that is a good question. Who is the book for? The book is written for beginners, for experienced people. All of them will get benefit by this. Older people, younger people. And my suggestion is that this is mainly written to my children's age group, my own age group of people. We have had a little bit more closer understanding about the Vedas and this as we grew up. But my next generation, especially my children, Shekhar and Kala, they have born here. They have seen me doing that, but how much deeper they have gotten it within themselves, I do not know. So I start encourage, starting with everything starts at home. So starting with Shekhar, Manali, Kala, and Kirit, to read and follow what is in the book, read it very slowly. Don't read it like a thing and skip. Like in 2 paragraphs, what I said, the power of mantra, you pay attention to it. Hey, is it so powerful? And it is said by Maharshi Aurobindo. And then suddenly it is to my grandchildren. I want to spend more time with them. And of course, Meena, Naveen, and Nikhil and Usha, they have already read my first chapter. It is to their level, certainly high school and above. Usha is really young. She is only third grade. But Naveen, Nikhil, eighth grade onwards, they are also a little bit younger, but they are reading much advanced books and all this. So this will be easy for them. So who this book for? This book for all people. And in fact, you can also go to Amazon.com, my book page, and there are various reviews. And I just saw yesterday, March 4th, some person has said, this is written in such a simple language for all Sanatana Temple, Sanatana Dharma followers, but also to people of the other faiths who will get an idea of Sanatana. That is another point I wanted. 9:20. If there are no other questions, I will add that point. Namely, one of the other difficulties that happened to uh, the Vedas negative uh, projection in the English press stayed as it is because Hinduism, even though the word was given by Westerners, ours is a Sanatan Dharmic living. It is a Dharmic living. And this Sanatan Dharma, if you want to call it Hinduism, that is fine. But Hinduism as a religion is not set up analogous to the other Semitic religions or Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. There is a hierarchy. If you take the Catholic Church, there is a Pope, ultimate authority, and there are archbishops, cardinals, and there are hierarchies. So, and they teach, there is theology teaching. So, any statement anyone makes that are not approved, but there will be immediately responded to and the proper meaning given. Similarly with Islam, similarly with Judaism. Whereas Hinduism is a no structure. Even though we have the Acharyas and our Paramacharya, Kanchi Acharya, Sringeri, and the Dwaraka, Puri, Joshimat, all the four matas, Abhishankara set up, there are there to guide. They roll in a guidance level. So there is no hierarchy. And most writings about are come from many people have gotten understanding of Veda from the books by because English is the language we all know. So Max Muller, and in fact there is even a Max Muller Bhavan in Madras who has not done a very good job of explaining our Vedas, and still we glorify with a Max Muller Bhavan for him. When that explanation and all that is only on the surface meaning and it's not accurately describing our Veda. So this non-hierarchical nature, and you are free. So as we look out now, we are no guidelines. There are no structure to say, hey, worship, unless the parents tell the children and the children are willing to do that, or on their own they want to go to the prayers, these mantras, this Veda itself may be lost to posterity. So it is our responsibility to keep this alive and transfer it to the next generation. So the answer to the question, who this book for? The book is primarily addressed to the next gen and the next gen. My children's and my grandchildren's generation is this book addressed from high school, certainly from college and onwards. Everyone 12, 13 years old onwards can read this book. They may be easily able to read chapter 1, chapter 2, appendix 1, chapter 6, chapter 10. The advanced level will be needed to read only chapter 4, 5, 7, and 8. Except these 4 chapters, that chapter also they will be able to understand, but it will require their parents to read and explain that. So this can be done as a family reading also. And my goal is to share the accurate and authentic information of Vedas amongst all families. And if 10 families who listen to this lecture do this, each of those 10 families can spend it to take 2 or 3 of their close families. And that is the way I hope to run this book. Any other question? I do not see any other question, and we are almost, we have only 5 more minutes. I thank you all for taking the time to listen to this on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night if you are in India. Please feel free. There is I have a dedicated website, https://understandingthevedas.com. You can, from there, you can send any questions to me. That questions will come to me. I will respond to that question also. Any other question? With this, I plan to end this current session. I thank you all for listening. Thank you and have a good day. Any questions, please go to my website, understandingthevedas.com, and send email from that website. It will come to me and I will respond to them. Thank you very much for your time.